The road trip from hell has come to a close. Joe and I are going to talk about the Los Angeles Dodgers series the Mariners just finished up and kind of where that leaves them in the standings, as well as just kind of a wrap on this road trip as a whole. We're going to talk about a Dipoto interview over on The Athletic by Ken Rosenthal and what that means for the future of this team in the next couple of years. And we'll wrap it all up by talking about the San Francisco Giants series that the Mariners are about to start back home starting on Friday. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 115 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Make sure you guys give us a listen and a 5-star review. And I am here with Joe. Joe, it is the Nikolai Belinsky episode of the podcast. How are you?
I feel like Big Eagle. Feeling good, man. This is a special episode for you and I and any COD Zombies fan out there. It's just the vibes around the team bad. But since we're doing episode 115, vibes are high, dude. And it's just, I think it's fitting going along with some of the delusion that's happening for me specifically. Like any sort of distraction to maybe keep my morale high and my vibes positive about this team. I'm going to need anything and everything to try and deflect with how the road trip has gone. It's just been terrible. You knew going into this road trip, though, that the Dodgers were never going to be a team that you're like, oh, yeah, we could go in there into LA and take them down. Like, that's just not something we had ever envisioned. And whether or not you're like, oh, they play better against bad teams or like play better against better teams, play worse against the bad team, like, it doesn't matter. This Dodgers series felt chalked from the get-go, okay? This was the easiest bet to take as far as losing a series this entire year was the Los Angeles Dodgers going into 2024 with their billion-dollar payroll. But you probably won't win $1 billion in BetOnline, but you could sure as hell try.
Thank you to BetOnline for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. The end of the MLB season is right around the corner, so teams are definitely ramping up for the playoff push. And with that, also, the NFL season is approaching soon. Preseason has already started. New Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald potentially leading the Seahawks to a great season. And you can find all the best online betting trends with BetOnline. They've got every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Head to the website to get in on the action. Use promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. BetOnline. The game starts here.
We kicked off the Dodgers series, Colton, with a impressive performance by no one else other than Gavin Stone of the Dodgers. Brian Wu looked pretty damn good in this game, albeit.
Yeah, I was going to say, wait a second.
Alongside Gavin Stone. I'm mainly saying it because Gavin Stone set his career high in strikeouts with 10. Ooh, haven't heard that one before. Opposing pitcher pitching against the Seattle Mariners.
What a feat.
Get a new trick, buddy. Brian Wu was great. He held this Dodgers lineup scoreless for 6 innings. Like, dude was out there shoving. Unfortunately, it does come to an end when he's trying to extend that start beyond the 6th. He was cruising. I'm not mad that he was out there. Like, that's what needed to probably happen. Like, it is what it is. It's just Gavin Lux runs into a ball, and then Max Muncy, who got activated for this series, also runs into a ball. It's just like, all right, what were you going to do? And the thing that I guess prevents you, like in the context of like, what are you going to do? Score runs, never going to happen. It just wasn't going to happen. This team just does not look confident at the plate at all. There's no like semblance of consistency or competence in the batter's box. It's just every single time you think like, oh, maybe something will go right. It doesn't. And blame Freddie Freeman and 2 incredible defensive plays. Whatever. The game was chalked to from the beginning, I feel like.
Mariners had 2 hits in this game, one for Julio and one for Justin Turner. And I think that Turner had a great return to the stadium. I think that it was really cool to see how loved he was there. It just kind of goes to show how good of a dude he is. But yeah, when your only chances in game 1 were robbed by Freddie Freeman, that can't be your only chance to score. Like, you have to bring up more chances than just, oh, we lined a ball, we hit it to Freddie. It'll turn. No, it won't. Like, you need to give yourself more chances than like the 2 or 3 that you had in this game. Was what it was, unfortunately. I mean, nothing we could do about it now. 2 walks this game, 1 to Randy, 1 to Julio. Julio did go 1 for 2. Like you said, Brian Wu was quite good. 6 in the third with 2 earned runs, only gave up 2 hits here, one of them being the home run to Gavin Lux. That other earned run that came in was actually off of Jimmy Garcia.
Yeah.
Jimmy Garcia got the inherited runner and gave up the home run to Max Muncy here. So another rough outing for Jimmy Garcia. He is just not, I don't know. He's just looked pretty bad recently. He looked good at the start of his Mariners tenure. But then going into game 2, Joe, with Walker Buehler on the mound, this is a game where the Mariners had an opportunity to run away with this thing. The bats didn't look terrible to begin the game. They looked like they were catching up to Buehler quite well, but in the end, that just wasn't the case.
And it's hard with how, I guess, Buckner was calling the game. I'm not going to only attribute the Mariners' shortcomings in this game to that, but Bryce Miller only getting 4 innings definitely was also part of the equation there. And his pitch count was just running up. There was some moments where he'd get a call, and then the next pitch he wouldn't. And the Dodgers working counts, getting Bryce Miller deep, like that was definitely a recipe for success that felt like they were definitely executing on. They get Bryce Miller out after 4. He was, I mean, I don't want to say cruising, because I wouldn't call what he was doing was cruising, but he was limiting damage up until the 4th inning, where a random, like the weirdest home run I think I've probably seen, where the ball goes behind the pad, but it's enough for a home run and then falls back down. It's just a weird play. And then Muncy follows that up immediately after. It's just like, okay, we're there. The Mariners have a lead at that point, though. They did score 2 in the first. It was a Jorge Polanco double. Polanco, I mean, he drove in all 3 runs. Like he was the offense in this game as far as driving in runs. Cal had a 2-hit game. Robles had a 2-hit game. Unfortunately, Julio goes 0 for 4. Like Rayleigh got on base twice and scored once. The offense for some of the guys looked pretty good. Rivas, random 2-hit night. It ends poorly for him later on, but we're not quite there yet. They, like you said it, they got to Walker Buehler. He did not look sharp. His command wasn't there. They walked 3 times against him. They got 7 hits off of Walker Buehler. They also got him out in the 4th inning. It's just once he was out, they couldn't do anything against the Dodgers bullpen. And is that a credit to the Dodgers bullpen or lack of approach by the Mariners offense? I think it's probably a mix of both, but not being able to score any more runs beyond the 3rd inning, it's a recipe for disaster, especially when your bullpen has to cover 5 innings and you don't have Jimmy Garcia, albeit he's been not great, but like having him be able to go in there instead of, say, like a guy like Taylor Saucedo in a very pivotal inning or pivotal 2/3 of an inning, whatever. I will let you speak on that, but the Mariners do lose this game 6-3. They got down. I mean, it was a tie game, but we'll get to the how we got there and how the Dodgers ended up winning this one.
Yeah, Taylor Saucedo should have never been in there. Like I believe it was the 7th inning that he was left in. He came out to start that inning, which meant that he had to face 2 batters. But this, in terms of mismanagement of the bullpen, this was like the nail in the coffin, in my opinion, for Scott Servais' bullpen management. It's not good, more often than not. Taylor Saucedo came in, got an out on a lefty, and then that was the end of the inning. Great, pull him out right then and there. And then going into the 7th inning, maybe have JT Chargois pitch that inning, or Austin Voth. We saw Chargois up in the bullpen. We saw Voth obviously in the 8th inning. And the problem is because of Saucedo coming in and basically not getting the job done in the 7th inning, you went to Munoz there. And fine, Munoz was able to get the job done in that inning, but you needed him to then go back out for the 8th inning, which in the end just wasn't a good idea. Because I understand Munoz in that spot is the right move, like facing, Shohei, Mookie, Freddie, etc. Facing the top of the Dodgers lineup, good spot for Munoz. It's the fact that you didn't have anybody to bridge the gap between Sauce there and Munoz. Munoz should have never been in there in the 7th inning, but it should have been Chargois to start that inning, and then if stuff hit the fan, then go to Munoz. Munoz also just looked like he was hurting. He did not look good in his outing. Did end up giving up 3 runs, of course, on the Max Muncy home run. At that point, the game was out of reach. Jason Hayward, not Max Muncy. Yeah. And at that point, the game was out of reach. Like, you leave Sauce in there, he gives up the run. That's it. The game is now tied And the Mariners offense had no chance
Yeah.
at scoring any more runs in this game. Again, the mismanagement of the bullpen there was just rough to see. We also saw Robles come out of the game with an injury to his hip, another injury to that. So overall, this game, I mean, you felt the tide turn as soon as Taylor Saucedo marched back out there for the seventh inning. That was that.
Well, looking at like the way the lineup is constructed for the Dodgers, he got Max Muncy out in the bottom of the sixth. He took over for Colin Snyder, who gave you a solid 1 2/3. Like him going 1 2/3 is massive. Getting Saucedo out there for a singular out in Max Muncy is great. I think that is fine execution. In that seventh inning, it's lining up with Tommy Edman, who's a switch hitter, a lefty in Kevin Kiermaier. So you leave Sauce in there, he's going to get pinch hit for anyways, right? And then it's going to go to the top of the lineup in Ohtani. Sure, you maybe want to have the ability, if the bases are empty, for Sauce to go out there and maybe face Ohtani with a lefty. Maybe that's the idea. But him running Sauce back out there when he has not looked sharp against a switch hitter and then the obvious pinch hit opportunity for Kike Hernandez, sure, that doesn't result in an out, but Tommy Edman did get a double. Like, that was the pivotal moment, right? Where it's a leadoff double, and then you got a runner on second. Sauce is now not going to finish that inning because he can't, I mean, unless they turn some crazy double play, he's not going to face Mookie Betts. And that's where then Munoz has to come in and Mookie Betts hits a ball down the line. If Edman doesn't get on, if they're pitching Chargois or if they're pitching Voth, or maybe they just go to Munoz straight right there because they're like, okay, he'll have a chance to get Ohtani out regardless. And maybe they run him back out there for the eighth to face Betts unscathed at that point. It's just a bunch of what ifs. But yeah, the obvious one to completely erase is having Taylor Saucedo go out there again. It's just it was an unfortunate game too. One that like you're like, okay, yeah, we're in this one. Whereas in the first game, you're like, they were never in that game. And with game 3, it's just more of the same, I guess. Same old song and dance is how I would describe what happened in game 3. Got a little chippy early on. Randy Rosarena pulls a foul ball, almost a home run, barely by like 2 feet, and then immediately gets plunked the next pitch by Jack Flaherty. And there was a little bit of an exchange there. So that was a little funky, but seemed like everything was all right. He does score later on a Dom Canzone sac fly, so that was good. Scored 1 in the second inning. Exciting stuff. They scored early. It was then 2 costly errors that would doom the Mariners in this game, I would say. Leo Rivas bobbles what would be the final out in the third, and then Ohtani walks. Betts then doubles, which scores both. That's 2 runs there. They get another one in the fourth, and then they drop 5 on the Mariners' head in the fifth. Another error cost some runs there. Logan's final line was 4 2/3 innings pitched, 7 hits, 8 runs, only 6 of them being earned. So still, I mean, it's a pretty significant tally there. 2 walks, 7 Ks. The bullpen pitched fine in this one. Didn't really, I mean, they didn't give up any runs. So that's kind of the good thing, I guess. Mariners do score a little bit in this one. They got 4. They got 4. It was, I mean, the second run was a bases loaded walk, courtesy of Dylan Moore, so that was something. The run in the 8th was a fielder's choice, essentially. Runners on first and third. Dom Canzone beats out the double play. And then home run in the 9th by pitch hitter Mitch Haniger. So a little garbage time homer there. This game wasn't good. Like, it just was an ugly game. Jack Flaherty goes 5 2/3. Like, he didn't really pitch excellent, but it doesn't take excellence to get through this Mariners lineup a couple times. I said it was just more of the same. The Mariners are 64 64. So this 1 8 road trip, that's what the more the same was. They just didn't have it, right? They're 64 64. Their first time being 500 since April 24th, almost 4 months ago. They were 12 12. The last time they were 500. For a frame of reference, in 2023, the last time they were 500 was on July 24th. Then, of course, they had their historic end of July into August where they won the most games in Mariners franchise history for a singular calendar month. Do they have that same gumption to pull that out in September? Oh, I doubt it. But we'll see. There's still 8 games left in August for them to not be 500 going into the final month of the year. They're returning home, so that's good. This is a pretty pivotal off day, I would say. Just with everything needing like a nice reset and just going back home.
So now, Joe, going into an off day before the Mariners get back home to face the San Francisco Giants, I do want to throw one more question at you before we get to the Jerry Dipoto interview. And that is, what moves do you think need to be made during this off day? Because it feels like this is just like a day that just makes sense for just, you're coming back home, you know, you have the off day after the worst road trip and probably the worst this team has looked all year. What moves do you think need to be made as we get back home?
Oh man. I think this off day feels like one where, especially, I mean, it is an off day, right? Like the bullpen's going to be like rested enough, but this road trip was taxing for a lot of fronts for the bullpen. Sauce should probably not be on the major league club going forward. Is there an option down in Tacoma that you might turn to as far as even a lefty is concerned? I mean, Gabe Spire, he's down there. And just looking through his last couple game logs down in Tacoma, the last time he gave up an earned run was on August 8th against Reno, where he went an inning, had 3 hits, 2 earned runs. But since then, 4 scoreless appearances on the 8th, or on the 10th, the 13th, the 15th, and the 17th. Gabe Spire, a guy that you've seen have success previously in this year before he kind of fell off the table, but last year was also really successful. I don't think that that's a bad idea. I think Gabe Spire could make sense to bring up and send Sauce down. I don't think that you're going to see any offensive ones necessarily. I feel like Rivas has been playing fine enough. Like, I don't think there's someone down in Tacoma that would make sense to bring up as like some sort of offensive substitution. We might see Julio play center field going forward. Like he said that there's a possibility that he could be ready to go play center field during the homestand, but that is yet to be seen. The big one, I guess, beyond like pitching stuff, like a coaching change. This is the worst road trip at the worst possible time. If the clubhouse is completely lost, it'll turn isn't going to cut it anymore. I think a coaching change could be necessary, and that will kind of lead into the Jerry Dipoto stuff here in a second. But I would not be shocked if Christopher Negron is the manager going forward after this off day. Did you have something else in mind beyond like Gabe Spire?
Yeah, in terms of bringing guys up, I mean, he's not a lefty, but Chris Davinsky, so far in the month of August, is a 1.23 ERA. He's given up 1 earned run this month.
Okay.
Then 7 1/3. He struck out 11 with 5 walks, so he's walked quite a few. But that's an option. A guy who's been there, done that. Another guy that, I mean, maybe is in the month of August. Yeah, I don't know how the last 7 games things work. Like, this is weird. In the month of August, this says that Tyler Locklear in 56 at-bats is hitting 289, 414, 554 with 4 homers and 13 RBIs in the month of August.
Okay.
Another guy that might make some sense to bring up as well. I think...
Who would you send down on the offense?
I need Dylan Moore off this team.
Okay.
I need Dylan Moore off this baseball team. Like, I need water.
You're giving "I'm tired, boss" from the Green Mile.
Tired, boss. Like, oh my goodness. He's offering nothing to this team right now. Leo Rivas is the better option currently. It's just the way it is. As in for Ryan Bliss here, if I can pull it up, I don't think that he hasn't really been down very long in August. He is, however, in 51 ABs, hitting 314, 407, 529 with 3 homers and 7 RBIs.
It's the PCL, though. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. It is a PCL. So I don't necessarily know what the right move is, but in terms of, getting rid of Scott Servais and maybe going to either Christopher Negron or even Manny Acta as your manager moving forward, this is something that, as Jerry Dipoto, who talked with Ken Rosenthal and had like some quotes on an article with Rosenthal in The Athletic, Dipoto said there is a chance here that we could be seeing a coaching change. I'll just read to you what he had to say here when asked if it's time for a new voice in place of Scott Servais. Dipoto said, "It definitely has to be a consideration for us to talk through everything. That's just reality. We've underperformed, and there is some discussion for each of us to have about the part we have played in coming up short as we have at this point. I say that, but until a week ago, we were in first place or a game within for roughly the last 120 days. I don't know that the season could have gone much better, considering how inconsistent our offense has been. I don't want to act like this has been an unmitigated disaster, but we have very much underperformed our own expectations based on our talent. Needless to say, I think Ty Dane Gonzalez, his quote specifically, he kind of said it perfectly. When he quoted that and he said, "The Jerry interview doesn't read like someone who's going anywhere anytime soon. The quote about Servais, though, ...
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with that. And I think that that is where I'm at in terms of where this team should go. Scott Servais, it's just time for him to go. Unfortunately, like, somebody has to take the fall. In my opinion, a coaching change is not going to fix this team. It's not going to happen. Sorry. That's just not how coaching changes work. We saw the Phillies, like, what was it, last year or the year before that,
Yeah.
when they went from Joe Girardi to
Rob Thompson.
All of a sudden, the Phillies caught fire. I'm willing to bet that's because the team was actually good. And when they underperformed for the first 50 games, the team just figured it out the rest of the way. Like, instead of, oh, Girardi's gone, who has been one of the better managers in baseball history with the Yankees.
Yeah.
All of a sudden he goes to the Phillies and he's bad. It just doesn't make sense. You've seen big name managers, Joe Madden. You've seen, like, who else? Joe Madden. Ron Washington's with the Angels right now. Team's ass. It's a terrible baseball team. Doesn't matter who the manager is.
Yeah.
The team is bad. So until, like, a manager can only do so much, but it is also a manager's job to get the best out of his players. And right now we're not seeing that with the Seattle Mariners. Scott Servais is not getting the best out of these players. He's actually getting the worst out of these players. And is it all his fault? No. But I think this would be a time to get rid of Scott Servais. And I don't think that he is going to be necessarily out of the organization. I just think that he is no longer going to be the manager. He will probably find a spot somewhere in the front office, maybe in the scouting department or something like that. That is where I would assume Scott Servais would go, so he sticks with this regime. But Christopher Negron or Manny Acta, I think, just make the most sense to be the manager moving forward.
You said that, like, he's getting the worst out of the players, and it's just, and same thing with, like, part of the Jerry Dipoto quote, where he's talking about, like, it has, like, we were, like, it was a successful part of whatever, but it's also, like, been a disaster simultaneously. And everyone knows why. The complete polar opposite directions that the pitching is gone and the offense is gone. You look at the pitching, you're still leading the entire league in team pitching ERA, right? Like, you have been dominant in that regard every step of the way, specifically the starters, but the bullpen, it's a different story. They kind of bring the starters down a little bit in terms of, like, wins above replacement, but we all know how good the starting rotation has been. Then you turn to the offense, and the offense is still the lowest batting average in baseball, the highest strikeout percentage in all of baseball. They are a below average WRC plus. They're sitting at 96 when the league average is 100. The reason why they're so close to that is because they manage to slug the ball decently. And they take, I mean, I don't want to say they take a decent amount of walks, but they're nowhere near the bottom in terms of I say nowhere near. They're the fifth worst, but they're not the bottom, right? They're a couple steps up from the White Sox, who miraculously have a higher batting average than the Mariners, but they're still about 25 points ahead of them in terms of on base. There are things that the offense can do. It's never consistent enough. How do you get a consistent offense out of a team? Is it firing the manager? I don't necessarily think that's going to be the exact right answer. It's not like a cause and effect situation, like you're saying. Like, it's not going to directly lead to a above average offense the rest of the way. Could it light fire? Yes, but it's not going to inherently be the actual cause. Like, it's just the players being like, oh, hey, we got that dude fired, huh? Shame. Let's play baseball. Like, it's a very hard, nuanced situation. I think that whoever does end up taking over as the manager of the team, like, if it's, I feel I would probably lean Negron over Acta for me, but beyond this year, I don't know if it's like if they would just run with Negron beyond this year, or if there's someone out there in the cesspool of former managers or former players wanting to become managers. Like, I don't know. Should we have not let Stephen Vogt go to Cleveland? Maybe. That could have been a very nice little ushering into a new managing regime, I guess, for the Mariners, if Stephen Vogt stayed for this year and then took over for Servais now, that would have been like the most obvious decision ever. But we don't have that luxury right now. I am very not tuned in with like who would be a good manager, who would not be a good manager. Like that's really not where I don't know how you measure that. Like, I don't know, like, what does make a good manager, what doesn't. Like, sure, you can look at failed managers in the past. Like, you could look at, like, Phil Nevin and be like, oh, okay, he's kind of a dummy. But, like, I don't think Scott Servais has necessarily been a bad manager. He has, I'd say, gotten 3 years in a row, not counting this year, so 2021, 2022, 2023, a team that on paper was worse than what they ended up performing as record-wise at the end of the year. And is that there's certain things you can look back on each year. Like 2021, they were like the fun differential, right? They were just winning every one run and like extra innings game that they maybe shouldn't have been. And 2022, they were beating up on all the good teams and maybe not so much the bad teams, but there was like a mix of everything. 2023 was the opposite. They were beating up like on a lot of the bad teams, and some of their pitching was growing to areas maybe that they hadn't expected to reach yet. And they performed pretty well. This year, the offseason moves, whatever, blah, 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 like 54%, stupid stuff, okay? The Fangraphs projected at the beginning was like an 83 win team or something like that. That's still within reason. I don't think that the team is necessarily like underperformed by like record standings because the pitching has been so good and the offense has been so bad. Like it's kind of balancing out in the middle there. It's just you've had so much time to continue to get the best out of players that you're now starting to get the worst. Like you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain kind of a situation. And that's what I feel like has kind of happened. Like he has exhausted all of his opportunities, unfortunately.
I think that the reason that it's so hard to like pick, like tune in to who could be a good manager is because there really isn't a criteria. There is no criteria because again, you could have the guy who's been a great manager before come in, and if it's a shitty baseball team, it's a shitty baseball team. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Look at the Angels again. I think that I think we're both in agreement that Scott should be fired on Thursday.
Probably.
He should not be here for the rest of this season. With that being said, in the offseason, let's just assume really quick, because I think you and I are kind of in the same boat, that Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander are still here next year. Mm-hmm. In the offseason, I would assume they completely revamp the coaching staff. Everybody except for maybe Pete Woodworth and Perry Hill are gone. Mm-hmm. I think that because of that, what I find interesting is that when people blame, like right now for the Mariners, they blame Scott Servais for how bad the hitters are. What about how good the pitchers are? Does Scott have no effect on that? Like, how can he have so much effect on one thing but not the other?
Yeah.
Like why are we blaming Scott about the hitters, but we're praising
praise,
Pete Woodworth with the pitchers?
Mm-hmm.
And why are we not blaming? I mean, we're blaming Jarrett DeHart, right?
But
for the batters, but at the same
blame
time,
and the praise are not equivalent. Like you're not giving 50% to Pete Woodworth and 50% to Scott for what they've gotten out of their pitchers. But when in terms of how blame and praise goes, it's like, what have you done for me lately? I think is maybe why that is the way it is, and like how that conversation starts is like, okay, the team is bad because of this. That is directly their fault. But the team is sometimes good because of this, but they don't have any effect on that because it's the players playing well, right? Like that. It's a weird, like, again, nuances just riddled throughout this entire conversation and will be, I think, for any major league club for the rest of time. It's not going to always be one answer. And that's just something that maybe some people have a hard time coming to terms with, because you want it to be one answer. You want it to be a simple, like, oh, let's just get rid of Scott and it'll be easy peasy, grass is greener, rainbows and sunshine. It won't be. Until that moment happens, it's just never going to be that way.
There's a part of me, Joe, that wants to see Scott Servais be fired, right? And then for the team to still be bad. Just so I can look at everyone and say, see, it's not just the manager. It's everybody, top to bottom.
The spiteful baseball watching.
Obviously, I don't want the Mariners to be bad the rest of the year, but there's just a part, like there's this much, like 6 inches of me, that wants that to be the case. Just because I think it would be so funny. But at the same time, nonetheless, we're all in agreement. Scott Servais should probably go here on Thursday. I agree that it should be probably Christopher Negron the rest of the way. I think that he's earned it. He seems pretty well respected in that clubhouse, and I think that in terms of nice dudes, he's up there.
Mhm.
He's one of the nicest dudes in the world. And so I think that starting with on Friday, basically the first game against the Giants, we should see Christopher Negron as the manager of the Seattle Mariners, Joe. But with that being said, we go into game one. Tell me about the pitching matchup.
We've got Luis Castillo, the Rock, back home on Friday in a City Connect. I feel like he gets City Connect night a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just something that happens for him. Maybe it's also because, didn't he pitch on Sunday as well in the City Connects, like on Sunday Night Baseball? So, like, maybe that's a little recency bias. Against Hayden Birdsong, of course. Naturally, Hayden Birdsong of the San Francisco Giants. He's a 22-year-old right-hander. On the year, he's made 9 starts and thrown 41 innings. He's got a 5.01 ERA on the year. So, as far as Giants pitching is concerned, when you think about Logan Webb, Blake Snell, Hayden Birdsong's not really in that conversation of like good Giants pitchers, at least start. But he's young, so maybe he has some room to grow. But Castillo on the bump here, I feel good, especially returning home because the team just plays infinitely better at home than they do on the road. Colton, I like this matchup as far as, I guess, like breakdowns of like what team comp kind of makes sense. Like the Giants, they're not an overpowering offense. They've got a 101 WRC plus on the year. They're 12th in baseball. The Mariners, obviously 96. They're like in the 20th range. And then as far as pitching is concerned, the Giants have a 4.17 ERA. It's not anything special. They're 19th in all of baseball. I'm going to say something maybe a bit egregious. I don't know how that team is 2 games over 500 with a -7 run differential, right? They're probably winning more 1-run games or just obviously scoring a little bit more than the Mariners to allow them to win games that their pitching does well for them. Whereas the Mariners aren't. Expected win-loss, the Mariners are 66 and 61. The Giants are 63 and 65. And it's all because run differential. And as far as like that equation is concerned, obviously the Giants are, as we stand right now, 65 and 63 as we're recording this. The Mariners, well, not any better, right? I like the matchup in game 1. I think the matchup in game 2, though, unless you want to talk about game 1, Colton, the matchup in game 2 should be a fun one. It's Blake Snell coming into Seattle. He's been pitching very, very well this year, obviously through a no-hitter, against George Kirby, who I want him to like actually take the next step. Like, he has been good. He has had great moments. He had a stretch where he was pitching better or keeping pace with Logan Gilbert for about 8 starts. And then Detroit happened. And it's like, okay, where did it go, George? What happened? And he's an ultra competitor. We know that's how he works. I think returning home against Blake Snell opposite him, I think will be a good matchup on Saturday, the 24th. I think is Jake going to be there on Friday or is he going to be there on Saturday?
Saturday. Why?
Oh, W, dude. W. You guys are in for some absolute cinema. Colton, what are you looking forward to in that game?
Just Blake Snell in Seattle, man. I mean, like, I think that I'm just looking forward to being at the ballpark. Like, I talked about this before. I just want to experience baseball the rest of the way. I just want to go and enjoy my time at the ballpark. You know, just kind of sit there and be like, okay, like, you know, we only get to watch this for another month.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, knowing that there's an end date right now, that we're pretty positive, right? We're all pretty sure that the end date is going to be that September 30th game against, I believe it's Oakland.
Yeah.
The last game of the season. That's it. That's the end date. So knowing that there's like a time limit on how much more I can enjoy Mariners baseball the rest of the season, I think it makes me appreciate it when I'm watching it more. I'm gonna go say hi to Jake, of course, on that Saturday. I think something I wanted to mention earlier is, yes, we've been downers over the past, week or so. Rightfully so. The Mariners had a terrible road trip. There is still a chance that like, if this team all of a sudden, like, let's say, Joe, that Scott Servais gets fired, Christopher Negron becomes the manager or whoever, and all of a sudden the Seattle Mariners go on like a 10-game win streak. It does. Somehow firing Scott Servais does make this team better. I am ecstatic about that. Like, I'm not going to, I will be the first person to say I was wrong. I will be the first one to say it, because if that is what happens and the Mariners are all of a sudden right back in this thing, I mean, the Astros lost Wednesday. The Red Sox took care of business, won 2 of 3 versus the Astros. Like, the Mariners have a chance. The Astros have been playing out of their mind recently. The Mariners still have a chance. They're going to see the Astros again at some point this season with 35, 36 games left, whatever it is. It takes one hot stretch where simultaneously maybe the Astros start to lose a little bit to be right back in this thing, right back at the top of the division. And we could be talking about this in a month's time, and the Mariners could be in first place. There is certainly that possibility. It sucks right now. It really does. But just the idea of going to the ballpark and just enjoying it for what it is instead of having expectations, I'm really looking forward to. But I also, in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, man, there's a slight hope. There's a teeny tiny bit of hope that all of a sudden this team could rattle off 5, 6, 7 wins in a row, and we're right back in this thing.
Is it about 6 inches of hope?
About 6 inches.
About 6 inches, and I think it can start with returning home after an awful road trip. You good?
There was a hair.
Got it. Returning home after an awful road trip and starting the end of August, going into the transition to September, which is the final push. Starting that off on the right foot could, I guess, like completely shift the gear for the team, like completely shift the idea surrounding the team. Would a 10-game win streak put you directly in first place? It's going to take the Astros to lose. Like, you're either 4 or 5 games back heading into that series, I believe, unless the Astros play on Thursday. But again, you're around 4 to 5 games back. You're going to have to do more than win just 10 games. Like, it's going to be that hot stretch and then staying consistent beyond that. It can start, though, against the Giants, who I mentioned maybe are playing a bit better than what they're playing a bit better than what the underlying stats show, was what I was trying to say. The final game on Sunday, Bryan Woo, who has, dare I say, been the best pitcher for the Mariners in 2024, aside from Logan Gilbert. I'd say he has been, and some people might say he's been better, right? And it's hard because the innings and the consistency and the injuries are preventing him from maybe matching Logan in his innings. But Bryan Woo, he has shined in recent memory. He's up against Kyle Harrison on Sunday, a lefty, also a young guy. Very up and down year, I'd say. Like, he's shown, like, oh yeah, bro's like, yeah, he was the top prospect that, like, the Giants are expecting. But he's also shown that he does have his flaws. Like, I think a lot of young pitchers do. But Bryan Woo, a lot of the times this year, hasn't really shown, like, those shortcomings. I say this with hesitation because this team is hard to predict, but you should win this series against the Giants at home.
Yeah, you absolutely should. And Bryan Woo pitching against his favorite team when he was a kid. He was a diehard Giants fan. I think is going to be kind of bring a little bit of extra energy to him. I think it would have been really cool to see Bryan Woo against Blake Snell.
Yeah.
Like, you know, growing up, the team they're playing was their favorite team growing up. I think that would have been fun. But yeah, I mean, ultimately win the series and just get ready for the month of September, because it's not like the Mariners have a very tough schedule in September. The Astros have a harder schedule. The Mariners make it tough on themselves. Like, the Mariners have had probably a relatively easy schedule recently with the Tigers and then the Pirates. Doesn't matter. Like, I think that this series is a 1-2, again, assuming. I think the writing is on the wall for Scott to be fired on Thursday. I think that there's pretty much nobody that's disagreeing with that. They might just say screw it and just wait till the end of the year and just kind of give up, right? I don't think that's the right move. If they're going to fire him anyway, why not fire him now and send a message? But I think that if that somehow revitalizes the team, it starts with this Giant series. The fire under these guys' booties to get into gear. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm just looking forward to watching baseball the rest of the way, one way or another. And the one thing I really don't want to happen, Chill, the one thing I really don't want to happen is have this team go on like a 10-game winning streak and then miss out on the playoffs by 1 game.
With the 10-game win streak, like, the wild card's 6.5 as it stands as we're recording this. Like, the wild card is tough, and you'll need some help along the way. But if it's a 10-game win streak, whatever, some sort of hot stretch doesn't somehow get you the division because, say, the Astros keep pace, needing other teams to help you in the wild card is never a situation that you want to be in. But I agree. Like, do I agree? I don't know if I agree. I think inherently I agree. But I'd also I'd rather watch a team that has life than watch one that completely gives up. If that
I
makes
just
sense.
worry that they're going to give me hope again,
Yeah.
and they're just going to break it one more time
And
this
then
year.
let
You
you
know what I
down
mean?
again. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas right now, I have no expectations.
Mhm.
No expectations for the team. And if they keep playing like crap, it's to be expected. And I know that I'm going to try to go to the games to just enjoy being at the games. And if I have to go to the games and also all of a sudden worry about if they win or lose, ugh.
Ugh.
Just ugh. But that's going to do it for episode 115 of the Hit It Here podcast, presented by Bet Online, the Edward Richtofen episode of the podcast. Mein Gott.
Mein Gott.
We appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.